As you might know, the majority of the world drives on the right side of the road. But those pesky left side drivers still make up a whopping 30% of the world's population. Here's a map of which countries drive on what side. Now, the majority of the countries that drive on the left are current or former colonies of Great Britain. So how did Great Britain start driving on the left? The origin goes back to medieval times, when the only modes of transport were on a horse or on your own feet. Back then, people would often carry swords everywhere they went. Since most people are right-handed, they would wear their swords on the left side of their body so they could reach for them with their right hands. And if you're on the right side of a road and someone walks by, your swords would bump into each other. And there's nothing more uncomfortable than bumping swords with another man. Not to mention the fact that they could reach over and grab your sword, which is even more violating. So people simply walked and rode horses on the left side of the road, something which carried on in Great Britain, who passed it on to her colonies like spreading beans on toast. And if you were left-handed, well, as far as medieval times were concerned, you can go to hell, which is probably where you'll end up anyways for using your sinister devil hand in front of our holy lord. But if you remember this map, you may be wondering why Japan also drives on the left, despite never being a colony of Great Britain. The answer is actually the exact same, as samurai would also wear their swords on the left and it just never went away. So then the question becomes, if everyone was on the left, why did it stop in other countries? By the late 1700s, everyone was using large horse-drawn wagons and carriages. The front of a wagon is just a bench, so really you can sit on whichever side you want at the cost of limited lumbar support. But people chose to sit on the left side so they could hold the whip with their right hand and feed the BDSM fetish of their horses. Since the wagon drivers were sitting on the left, they also wanted others to pass them on the left, so they stayed on the right side of the road. This design was ultimately passed on to cars in most countries. Except, of course, in the UK and Japan, where everyone was too stubborn to change their ways. While Napoleon passed a law which made driving on the right the standard in France, the Brits passed the General Highways Act to encourage driving on the left. So, in turn, all the British colonies drove on the left while the French colonies drove on the right. The right side drivers scored a big win in 1908 when Henry Ford unveiled the Model T, in which the driver's seat was on the left. This encouraged a lot of holdout left side countries to switch over. In the 1920s and 30s, Spain, Italy, Canada, and most of Eastern Europe switched to driving on the right side. So why did Henry Ford make that decision? Well, the main reason was because carriages were already driving on the right, although Henry apparently also did it for women. Since the thought of a woman driving was unthinkable, Henry assumed that they would be passengers, and he wanted them to be able to get out of the car onto the safety of the curb. Truly a feminist king, that Henry Ford. In 1946, after years of mixed legislation on which side to drive on, China committed to right-side driving to complement their newfound alliance with the United States following World War II. At least that's what my research told me, although that sounds like a reason made up by Americans, so take it with a grain of salt. Interestingly, Sweden didn't switch from the left side to the right side until 1967. They did this despite the fact that 83% of the country had voted to stay on the left in 1955. Because whoever cared what the people think. To do this, the Swedes ran a 4-year education campaign to prepare people for the switch, putting this logo on items such as milk cartons and underwear. They even released a song titled "Keep to the Right, Svensson" by a band called the Telstars, which sounds like this. To facilitate the switch, the country had to build a new set of traffic lights for every single intersection and install them in advance before switching between the sets on the day of the change. They also had to replace every bus in the country and had to switch every car's headlights since they all shined more light towards the left. The entire thing was an insane logistical undertaking that cost around $1 billion in today's money. Needless to say, other countries probably won't be switching anytime soon, making this map the official guide for the foreseeable future. And that's the reason why every country drives on the side it drives. If your country wasn't a colony of England, France, or Japan and wasn't impacted by Henry Ford's sexism, then I'm sorry I didn't explain why your country drives on the side it drives on. I suggest you go live in a more notable place. Now please consider subscribing or I'll start telling you about Henry Ford's other opinions. And let me just say, they ain't fun.